Good evening, viewers. Welcome to Saturday's show. Donald Trump is back in the White House and the world is shaking again. His second inauguration has brought drastic steps. He immediately began undoing the reforms of the previous administration. A tightened immigration policy, cut progressive nonprofits globally out of U.S. taxpayer money, redefined relations with allies, and announced that Europe must provide its own security. The Munich Security Conference confirmed this new approach when Vice President J.D. Vance declared that the United States would no longer be the primary guarantor of European security and support for Ukraine would be greatly reduced. At the same time, Washington is trying to reassess relations with Moscow, which is causing a wave of uncertainty in Europe. What led the Americans to re-elect Donald Trump? How are his policies changing from his first term, and what does his return mean for global politics, the European Union, and the Czech Republic? Is the United States changing into a more conservative and pro-American country? And what role do moral values, conservatism, and faith play in his policies? Eliska Haskova Coolidge will answer these questions. As she has served as a White House advisor to 5 U.S. presidents, from J.F. Kennedy to Ronald E. Reagan, she subsequently worked in the U.S. State Department during the administrations of both Ronald Reagan and George Bush. Yeah, she has a unique insight into the workings of the U.S. administration and its relationship with Europe. How does she perceive the current atmosphere in Washington? Is Trump really the leader his voters wanted? And what does his second term mean for the future of world politics? Our interview with a woman who has been present at key moments in American history begins now, and I welcome to the studio, for the record, Eliska Haskova Coolidge. Hello. Hello. Thank you very much. Donald Trump has returned to the White House after 4 years. Tell me, why do you think the American people elected him? What made them so attracted to him? Humanity.
His humanity. You can say that in one word. Because his approach, always in his life, has been people, and that is wonderful in a democracy, and it's worked before in his business. And that's why he was so successful, because he remembered the name of the layers and the workers on the houses that he built. He came in there and told him, "You're the best mason but in the world." And that was it. And he had an attitude. He knew that it was terribly important to have access to people so that they could understand you and so that they could have access to you. And that's his biggest thing, I think, goal that he has in him, is that attitude.
Here's the trait. And besides that humanity that you're talking about now, what else do you think he has appealed to the American voter? He's brought back faith in God.
To America, and that has never been lost in my entire time in America since I was 8 years old when I came there, or 9. Faith was and beginning to be again, as you noted in that inauguration day. God was mentioned hundreds of times. Without the Lord God, nothing just works. And I think faith in God gives us the values that we need when we struggle with life a little bit, because faith leads us to forgiveness. Faith leads us to honesty, to understanding the other. These are all things that are embedded in a faith that has thousands of years old, and that really still holds true today. When President Masaryk was asked what his goals and duties would be in the presidency, he said, "Now the aims and duties will be many, but I will devote myself to building the Civitatis Dei, the city of God." It is very interesting that Dei has become so anti-God in America. Diversity, equity, inclusion was the same acronym, but to him something else entirely. This disappeared under Donald Trump and immediately started very strongly. these things to get to where they've always been in America, what gave them meaning and gave America a purpose and made it an example to the world in everything.
And that has to come back. I'll just add for our viewers that those three scriptures on where her was diversity, equality, and inclusion, which was one of the major federal programs of the previous President Joe Biden, that's just to add for our viewers for context, and that's why you were emphasizing, I assume, the DI, that it's gotten bad connotations just under the administration. Yes, it's a play on the writing. Mrs. Haskova, you talk about values. You talk about Donald Trump reaching out to people with his humanity, reaching out to people with his faith in God. However, there are certainly both marketing and economic issues at play in this election. If you would look further, because as far as I know, you were in America to vote, you went to the polls and you voted for Donald Trump. What is it that you're not hiding in your resolve?
I've paid my dues.
Yes, which I paid for. That's very high.
When I rescheduled the airlift to America just to try.
She threw the ticket. But so what else, besides those values issues? What else do you think Donald Trump, and not just her, but his entire team, has appealed to the American people?
So I think his humanity and all the meetings he's had with citizens, that really affirmed that humanity, that he listens to everybody. He's not the kind of guy who listens to the chosen ones. He listens to everybody, and you know that listening, that's why the lady gave us 2 ears and 1 ear, is terribly important, because it's a way or bridge of understanding. And lest you refuse at the very beginning his approach, the other, so that the listening is no longer a creation of the mind of what you want to say or think, but rather a little consideration of those things, every word of the person you're meeting. And listening, I think, is the key to that understanding. That's very important, especially at this time, to remember when we're going to hopefully have some.
That at the end of the war. You talked, Ms. Hasek, about Donald Trump. He can listen to anyone, yes. However, when we saw the inauguration, or even when we saw the footage of that election campaign of his, there was some criticism that there are a lot of business people around him, that there are a lot of people from the information technology industry around him, that even some people have been outwitted by him in Czech, but have changed their views because they were against him until recently. How do you look at that, how Donald Trump has basically conquered the most powerful business at the moment? Because the ones who are doing the artificial intelligence, they're the ones who are playing the world today.
He also confirmed the importance of the word respect in international relations, that like you have to respect the person you're dealing with. And that respect can be just respect for the people he represents or something. But to find some reason within yourself to have respect for the next person you're negotiating with. He'll recognize that. And that's what he goes by, I think. And that's why he's had so much success in life, because that's the way he's conducted himself. And I think that's the thing that we sometimes forget here, that there must be respect. When you go with someone to agree on something and you have such a strong experience against them, agreement is not going to happen. It can't be. And these are the things that I think people should be hearing about him right now.
Yes, but we're moving on. So you think that he also gained the favor of the really big tech giants or their owners by being able to build a respectful relationship with each other? Yes, because it's not...
I mean, their role is a little different than the role of a president in a democratic country. Oh, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of similarities, because if the leader of the company isn't honest, he's not trustworthy and doesn't understand to listen. Because in listening, you learn something about the person you're listening to, and then it's easier to get along with them. And that's what he's very sure of, and this is the thing that everybody, successful businessman, honors, because otherwise
it doesn't lead for the better. Success. Donald Trump has been in office for a month. Immediately after his inauguration, he started taking very drastic steps. I'm curious, which of those steps do you, with your experience, consider the most significant?
I think the corruption that existed in America, which is the first one, in the 30 years that I've been in the American government, 18 was up to me and 10 was at the State Department. I never saw any corruption. Never. You would never keep something expensive that someone given to him. And this pay-for-play, so-called, which was mantra of the Biden administration, which is absolutely non-existent in America before. And I think that this is, again, belief in God. One who has a measure of God would not behave this way. But unfortunately, it was a Catholic who behaved like that, which is very sad. I think that he, by his internship, and probably not this for me, but
that it was unfortunate. And so you say that you think the most important thing is that he's ridding the United States of corruption. So, and how do you view President Donald Trump's next steps, talking about raising tariffs on various countries? It's already happening somewhere. Some countries remain in limbo. How is he actually delivering on that America First campaign promise that he was also elected for?
Not in a way that makes America selfish. America has never been selfish. He doesn't want that understanding. He's very strong here in this country, that he's fighting for America and he's going to ignore Europe. He ignores Europe's approach. The European Union, that is, which will not agree because just doesn't believe in the things that he thinks are very important. And so he wants to encourage them a little bit. And by doing that, he's going to encourage them a little bit and threaten them a little bit. But like, he hopes that they'll change their attitude to their people and to be a little bit different. Because I think that, or I know that the European Union was founded on the fact that it was a group of democratic, but mainly a group of sovereign states. And that, I think, has been eroded because it has become also a bit of a greedy society that where money was flying back and forth, and it was about buying somebody instead of behaving decent and cohesive, because we have to be cohesive in a situation like this when we're a union. But with the recognition that each of us, each of our countries have our years, rules and histories and just cultures that can't just be undone and forgotten. It's a little bit different in America where there are states, but those are states of people who came there freely from different places and so on, so you can't compare. Union of Europe, which is a confluence of states that have a history of centuries of history that has to
must be respected. Actually, the word respect, we are attentive. I think, like most Europeans and perhaps Americans, listened to Vice President J.D. Vance's speech at Make. And there were words that European politicians, sickness often hear. There were words like nation. There were words like people. There were words like democracy is derived from the will of the people, and that the will of the people must be respected. Of course, unfortunately, I say for myself, unfortunately, it has aroused a positive response among those European leaders. Storm or no storm, what do you think? Well, I think it.
It's a shame, and I hope this turns around, because there was also a strong mention of the importance of God, which I see that as what's really conspiring with America right now. You ordinary people who heard those speeches with his story of the campaign speeches that they saw, how he was shot, they feel for him because they really believe that the Lord God sent him. He has always had balanced ambition with humility, and that's terribly important, and that's what religion teaches, that if you have great ambition, you have to have that humility. When he's a leader of an organization or a leader of the world, to recognize himself that he is not flawless, that we all make mistakes, and we all sometimes make something that we're not responsible for, that we're not proud of. And this is it. I think Trump has done, and he's been able to show it and affirm to the nation. And this was also in that amazing speech that Vice President Vance gave.
But the reactions to that speech, both from European politicians but also from the international press, especially the European press, have been very unflattering. There are words that it's actually declared a kind of ideological war by America and the European Union. Yeah, and I have even recorded the words of the German President Steinmeier, who said that they are side by side, two diametrically opposed worldviews. I would be interested to know what you think about that, if only because, after all, Western European and American civilizations have been very close to each other for decades. I think so too, and I think it's a great pity that it's been treated this way. There are people that I've talked to who were very enthusiastic about it, about the project, and they're Czech. So it's like do. But I think what we were talking about earlier, the acceptance that here must not be in a democracy, a select few running a country, but it has to be democratic. That means humanity and a relationship with the people that influences them in what they do. And then they are an example of embodying that for that nation. And I think that's failed a little bit around the world. And this is what Trump has awakened. I can be told that it's naive, that it's unimportant, but it really is. I think his greatest strength right now is the power to return to God and to the moral behavior. And that, even Václav Klaus, in a speech he gave on the 28th October, he said that success doesn't happen, just happen. But it will happen 1,000 little things that each of us does every day, and that's democracy. That's the breath of that democracy that just when it's strong, it makes the country just get that state on its feet so that they can have everyone's well and make everybody feel good about themselves and each other.
because now we're too divided everywhere.
That's a great pity. Yeah, just like now with Trump, with Donald Trump, that spirit has come back to the United States, whether it's that election campaign or even now after those first decisive steps. Do you think that a similar spirit can return to European countries?
I think it's come back to America with Biden and Obama, so it can certainly come back here to Europe, because he lived here and he was stronger. It's not just the religion, but it's about that respect that we talked about at the beginning. Respect is opening the door to the other. And it's opening the door to his mind and to his heart. And that is so important. The fact that Trump had respect for those uneducated, normal people who were coming out there to see him, listen to them, and convince them that what he wanted to do for them was right. That's what helped him. That victory. He wasn't a lackey of any group. He was himself. And he was willing to give his life for it, to do this. And it was a kind of rebirth of democracy in America, a true democracy. And it's going to take a little while longer, because it's not something that you're going to be a little bit, you turn around and go. It's going to take time. But we're on a good path, I think, and we're certainly not on any path against Europe or against former allies. That absolutely is a misinterpretation, and I'm sorry that a lot of people put it that way. That speech, that significant speech by that Vice President Vance.
That's the way I felt. I took it that way. Maybe the difference is that people who don't have that media voice like the speech, and those who currently do and are on the, let's say, political cutting edge didn't like it. And that's why
listening is important, but listening is not with a warrior's head that already knows what I am, but with an understanding of it, with whom I'm dealing, with respect. And those are the keys to success. And it's simple, but it seems very simple to me. But it's a thing that's been forgotten lately too, or hasn't been subtle enough.
I'll put on it. The other thing that Donald Trump talked about in his campaign that he has now started to flesh out is his entry into the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He is known to have been on the phone with President Putin. He is known to have some negotiations in the works. How do you view this whole process, and how do you think it will end? What do you see it ending up in? I should have, at Georgetown University, an amazing course in Russian history. I know it's unpopular to say it here. After World War II, we had the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall's Plan changed Germany's attitude. It helped heal the wounds, and after the fall of the curtain, there was no such thing as the Marshall's Plan. And because the war was immediately followed by communism, we never had a chance to thank Russia for its participation in that war, which meant, I don't know, 40 million dead or something. I don't know the exact number, but it was an insane number of dead people, citizens. And for the fact that we've been cut freedom from Nazism, and a little bit of a sense of that too. Explanation for Putin's actions in this
that when he saw that the people who still exist, who have strong sympathies for Nazism, neo-Nazism, which is pretty rampant here in Europe, now he's everywhere, but that the part where he stomped on it, there were Russians who had lived there for years. And they weren't allowed Russian schools. They were banned from church, and so on, and they were really abused by these neo-Nazis who had also settled there. And you know, the fact that we didn't say thank you and didn't have time to even acknowledge Russia's involvement at the time, that was one thing. And on top of that, now to do damage after the war, long after the war, to the Russians with the same people, that Russia, or against whom Russia has lost so many people, it seems to me, as difficult for the man who leads Russia, a Russian who leads Russia, because it's also a big difference. Russia has been led, as you know, by Stalin, who gave us the worst of times, and he was Georgian. Then the others, all the way up to Gorbachev, were all Ukrainians who led Russia. And they were totalitarian dictators, of course, like Russia. What is theirs is at the same time. That's Russian history. And that's what I think that we would. I didn't like that about America before, that it wanted to change the way it was run in different countries around the world, because it's not for America to do that. It is. We have to recognize that moral behavior and good people, it can be found in all countries, and that everyone is used to something different. To disrupt this, that is, it goes against peace and against humanity and against everything. This nation building that was going on during the Madeleine Albright and Clinton era, I think, was very nice and provoked
confusion and war and misunderstanding. I'm picking up again on the Russia-Ukraine conflict resolution, listening to you. My sense is that you're saying that President Donald Trump is looking at the conflict through historical context. I got that right.
What I'm hearing, I think so. I think this was very strongly advised to him before he died by Kissinger, who I think was 100% right about this. Now Trump has made it even better because he didn't want to disengage or Russia or China, but he wanted to be friends with everybody. That's what's important, and that's what you can do if you listen and if you have respect for those people. Look at what he did in North Korea. His respect against the Kim forced those missiles to be sent through America. That's the stuff. And that are terribly important. They seem like words, but they're not just words. It's the feeling you put into them. And the humanity that is so important in all decision-making. It's not about rules, order, peace. It's about compassion, understanding, about being able to say yes on the legal side. I don't agree with you, but I don't know enough about your ideals or your wishes. Oh, I don't know enough. Tell me about it. And now about this, to have some fun, it's more important, which is why I say respect is the key. That opens not only the head, but the heart up. That is only possible with a successful listening.
And how do you think this particular policy of Donald Trump, based on the values that we've been talking about here, will change the world?
I hope it does, and I hope for our children and grandchildren will have an easier life, but there still has to be that effort to understand, to respect, and to keep that head open when it comes to, we're going to do this. And respect is cheap, by the way. Respect costs nothing. It's not that you have to compromise on your value or to have respect for someone. And it's a way, it's a door to successful negotiation and successful listening.
Of all the new Donald Trump's administration, you can see that he has great respect for family. We see politicians with young children. We see J.D. Vance even traveling around Europe with his wife and young children. Tell me how this approach to the family, which after all is such an anchor for a lot of people, and the family, a fundamental anchor. So how does this approach to the family, where we see that these politicians value the family, that they consider it very important, how does that change America?
That's also a good change, a good example, because the family is really the foundation of society, and it's so important to know this. And the same thing of listening applies in the family. If someone complains that their child isn't listening to them, and I said, and you listen to him, because the child needs to know that his is being heard. And it's not just being the one that says, no, that's a dictator, but that's not democracy, not in the family, not in the state.
Nor
it's terribly important that we are, after these things, we can to have a substantive conversation and with respect.
At all. We talked about respect, we talked about family. Is there any other value that you think Donald Trump is bringing back to politics that you think can be extremely helpful?
Well, I think it's his attitude, and we've probably mentioned this a little bit too, his attitude towards normal people. He has a very open and warm approach with people. He doesn't talk to them and talk at them. He talks to them. That's a huge important quality. You can see it in him, that humility is well balanced with those strong goals that he has, and that his ambition doesn't overwhelm the vulnerability and the humility that you feel from him. So I think this is an important world leader today. And so that's where the respect for people comes from as well. And that's democracy. Closed-circuit television that disagrees with you, or closed churches.
It's not democracy. Has the atmosphere among the people in the United States changed in your opinion? Because I know that you live between Prague and the United States somehow after Donald Trump took office or was elected and then came into office.
I think it has certainly changed in America. I watched the inauguration with an enthusiasm that I cannot imagine. This was the most important election of my life. It's really never been that choice so as clear and as important as it was this time. The enthusiasm was also overwhelming. I think there are still people who feel differently, but I think it's moved a lot of the opposition, and I think a lot of Democrats, for example, have joined the Republicans. And that's another thing. And Trump has been embracing them. He hasn't been afraid to embrace them, even to lead. That Robert Kennedy, despite his family's criticism, offered to help Trump with things that he felt were important. But you know, a lot of people are losing their troughs in this fight. And that is no difference between here or in America. But these troughs may not be, because it's absolutely not fitting in a true democracy. And that's going back to the Lord of God. It doesn't matter which church you believe in, but the Lord God has to be there. And He's just going to help us get through this.
What role do you think Vice President J.D. Vance plays? Because vice presidents have always played a significant role alongside presidents of the United States.
I think the game is a very important role, and most importantly, he's not a man who is envious. And that's terribly important. He's pleased with himself, and he doesn't harbor any resentment, any envy. So when any of those member of the Trump administration seems more to be influential in what's going on for Trump, for the administration, he takes that as, thank God there's a guy like that. He's not taking it as he's better than me or he's closer than me. These are things that are very important to have, that you appreciate every person who contributes to a good cause. And I think Vance has that very strongly in him, and I think he has that education and that youth, which I'm glad to see, because he's a man who's got a lot of the great years of service to the nations yet. And I think that he's going to be in tune with those values like
Trump. Mrs. Haskell, does the fact that part of Donald Trump's family has Czech roots, do you think that plays any role in the relationship about the Czech Republic? I'm sure it does.
I, with Ivana Trump, in the year 2003, was awarded by the Czech Senate as a prominent woman in the Czech world. And the fact that Ivana and he, because it takes two, have that affection those Ivana's family cultivated, and I sent the oldest two children know Czech pretty well to those grandparents, and that those grandparents also led them to the character that they have. And that family is amazing, really, and I think that there's heart in it, and that is important, and it's very strong here in the Czech Republic.
I really like that. And isn't it a bit of a shame that some of the current leaders of the Czech government are bastardizing this relationship and not considering it important? Yes.
It's absolutely insane, and what our president said about President Trump is absolutely appalling. I absolutely do not understand how he could do this. A man who runs a country to say this. That was insulting and low and just.
Now, let's not just end with this obviously unpleasant experience. I do have a question that's maybe a little bit sneaky, but if you were living in America right now and you were moving between the White House and the State Department, would you want to work for Donald Trump? Yes?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that would be amazing for me. But I would also combine that with the fact that it's not about the party, but it's about personality. You know, when I interviewed at the White House back in '63, after graduating from Georgetown, no one asked me which party I belonged to. Neither did I. And they accepted me, and I was there for 18 years. So, you know, it's not about the party, it's not about a group of people, but it's about the trust, the rank, and the fact that there's a community and that you're a moral person, that you don't lie, that you just... Those are the things that are most important at all, and those are important as of the business and in government. It doesn't make any difference, because I also do courses, as you know, on corporate culture. Up to corporate culture is built on the same pillars as is government culture of a country. And that, I think, undoubtedly helps the success and understanding everywhere. Where that culture fails, it will fail everything. One person can fail, two people, but the culture cannot fail. The state and the company go on. And that's, again, going back on what I said once before when we were interviewed here, on that baton. Moral misery is the cause, economic misery is the effect. And that's a good thing.
That we start and end. Mrs. Heather, I thank you very much for coming to the studio. We follow. Thank you very much. Thank you.